Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to my latest live stream. I'm Simon Whiteley, a system safety engineer and accident analysis consultant from the UK. Welcome to my latest live stream. This is live stream number 26 in a series where I'll be talking about the Boeing Starliner Propulsion Anomalies incident on orbit from 2024, 2025. And this is essentially a continuation going through the official investigation report and looking at it, the content of it, through the lens of STAMP, STPA and CAST. So if you have any questions about that, you want some feedback, please comment below. Let me know that what your questions are. And of course, if you want to share some experience, then please type in the chat. Let us know what you'd like to share about. Now, just be aware there is a bit of a delay between what comes out of my mouth and what comes out of your computer. It's about 30 seconds to a minute, depending if you're on LinkedIn live stream or whether you're watching on YouTube or even on Facebook. So just be aware of that. And so yeah, welcome. Fantastic. Right, let's get stuck in. Let's just check that it's working. Yes, it seems to be. So yeah, we're all rearing to go. Here we go. Friday night, everybody. Right then. Look at that, the technology works. As I mentioned before, if you do have any questions about STAMP, STPA or CAST, please visit my website, whiteley-safety.co.uk. Press this green button here, I need help now. Stick your name and details in there and I'll set up a call and see how I can possibly help. And of course, the follow-on from this live stream series is this free live workshop that I'm doing. So I'm going to run a live free workshop where we can all get together and talk about this live face-to-face on Zoom, cameras and all, and really ask whatever questions you have about STAMP, STPA, CAST or this case study. And if you click on that link or click on the link I've put in the chat, you will be able to join a waiting list. And then once I've finished doing what I'm doing, I'll be able to send you an email and we'll get everybody together, get everybody sorted out. So fantastic. With that said then, so let's get on and talk about it. So last time, the live stream yesterday, number 25, we started to work through Appendix A, which is the NASA human factors section. So the human factors analysis methods. And we're going to continue with that. So we got up to talking about the supervision tier. So if you're familiar with the HFACS method, so first off, HFACS stands for Human Factors Analysis and Classification System, and this is NASA's version of it. So it's slightly enhanced compared to more traditional HFACS. And of course, they focused on organization, supervision, and preconditions. Acts are something that was not covered by the investigation for whatever reason. It wasn't really clear. I didn't quite appreciate why they didn't do that. So we've already gone through the organization tier topics on Livestream 25. So if you want to replay that, then you can either watch it on LinkedIn or you can visit my YouTube channel and watch it there. Of course, remember to like, share and subscribe, as all the famous YouTubers say. But today we're going to continue with the supervision tier. So this is, let's have a look. So we talked about organization on Wednesday, and now we're going to talk about supervision and then preconditions. So here we go. Let's get my digital pen ready. Here we go. So supervision tier within the NASA HFACS framework addresses how the supervisory chain of command. So you'll notice the supervisory chain of command, that's a layer or several layers in the hierarchical control structure model, contributes to preparation, training, conditions and behaviors. I'm using the wrong pen, there we go. The four subcategories described how supervisory action or inaction, so there we go, control actions, introduces latent embedded conditions that, when expressed, degrade organizational performance. So what I'll do, I'll just quickly grab my jigsaw puzzle piece so we can keep that in mind. Okay, supervision oversight. The supervision oversight category refers to the influence of direct supervision on safety and performance through day-to-day management, covering a wide range of responsibilities such as modeling, guidance, support, awareness, and interactions with subordinates, that ultimately build the quality of relationships between supervisors and personnel. So I suppose if we used our jigsaw puzzle we made earlier on, I suppose in this context, they're referring to this as the supervisor, if that makes sense. So actually, I might scribble that on there whilst I'm at it. So just bear with me a second. Let's make it a bit thicker. Let's see if my pen works. Look at this. Amazing. My handwriting's not that bad, honest. There we go, supervisor. And so the term they use for the frontline operator, where was it? Supervisors and personnel. There we go. Right. Effective oversight ensures personnel are supported, informed and aligned with operational and safety goals. So it ensures that, does it? Effective oversight ensures. Well, you could have effective oversight that doesn't provide some of those things, so, but then you've got you're sort of arguing about, well, what's the definition of effective oversight? What I'm trying to do is just stretch your mind a little bit, just to have a think about when we're talking about effective oversight. If we write that down, are we, as the author, implying certain things? Are we assuming certain things? Let's strip it back to the control structure and how the different elements in that structure interact with each other. And what are their roles and responsibilities, either explicit or implicit? And what are their capability to be able to do the various things? I mean, in this case, we've got a supervisor. Fantastic. They're there to do oversight. Okay. What does that oversight entail? And what does it mean to be effective? Because clearly, in this case, we've had a we've had a serious incident. So oversight somewhere, maybe in many places, has not been effective. Or has it been effective because it's measured in a certain way, but it's not actually fulfilled the needs of the control structure, the high-level safety constraints? So again, I think we need to be careful about using these kind of words, because they are loaded words, they are judgmental words, whether we realise it or not. And again, as investigators, when we're writing investigation reports, we have to be really mindful and take a lot of care about that. But I can appreciate, as I've said before, and it's written earlier in the report, the investigation team were essentially doing this alongside their full-time job. So, we can't really be too surprised if there's some questions over the content of it. And that's not criticism of individuals. They're trying to do the best that they can. They're trying to be as effective as possible given the structure around them. Anyway, I've laboured that point. Let's keep going. So leadership, modelling, feedback. Interviews cited numerous examples of lack of leadership capability to facilitate productive discussions. Okay, there we go. So there's an immediate recommendation there. Is that down to let's get our little control loop. So if this is our supervisor or our leadership, shall we say? In fact, actually, while I'm at it, what I'll do is I'll steal one of these and we'll call it leadership / supervision. So supervision / leadership. Leader, I can't spell today. There we go. Leadership. There we go. So if this is our control loop and we've got some supervision or leadership, let's group them together. There we go. And they are, their lack of leadership capability to facilitate productive discussions. Okay, so we're talking about control actions from the supervision leadership, and these interviews are essentially citing numerous examples of lack of leadership capability to facilitate productive discussions. So these interviewees are providing feedback to the investigators that this control loop with the supervision and leadership is not providing adequate capability to facilitate productive discussions. So why is that? What is it about that supervisor leadership that means they're not able to do that? Is it something to do with the decision making? Is it something to do with their beliefs? Is it to do with their feedback? Maybe they're not getting adequate feedback or any feedback about how their leadership capabilities are. Maybe people feel they're not able to provide that feedback, for various reasons. And of course, what's going on above this leadership supervision? Are they providing certain directions that are leading to this controller to behave in a certain way? These are the kind of questions the investigation should go and look at. This was described as a critical deficit in the anomaly resolution process and overall decision-making capabilities. Okay, so if it's a critical deficit, what is this investigation doing about it? What recommendations have we got? What activities are we going to go, what activities are going to be in place to go and deal with this, to go and investigate it and deal with it? Okay, so local training issues programs. So interviewees shared that although some training was conducted, fantastic. So whoever this is, training organizer, training provider, has provided some training to the team between NASA and Boeing, including integrated simulation sessions for failure scenarios. I think that's really interesting. That I want to just emphasize that for a minute, because the thing is this integrated simulation sessions, whoever and however they're defined for certain, failure scenarios. What about the potentially dangerous success scenarios where things appear to be, going as they should be, and then we end up with a dangerous situation? What is the controller for this and deciding what scenarios should be included? And what assurance have they got that they've got the most important scenarios, regardless of probability? That's a different conversation. That's in fact, I'm going to put a green line around that to remind me to think about later on. So in fact, actually, I'll do it like this. Integrated simulation sessions for failure scenarios. So is this the training provider? Yeah, let's put that here. There we go. That'll do. Let's make it a different color so I remember. There we go. Let's put that there. So many individuals involved in the real-time troubleshooting process had not participated in the original training. Okay, so why was that? If we've got a training provider that's supposed to be doing this, why did they not provide training to those people? What is it about the control structure behind that? Take in account that this mentions real-time troubleshooting process, but the earlier part of the report was very much about not real-time troubleshooting process. So is there an overlap? Are there two different training providers? Who gets to decide? Understanding the control structure for that would be beneficial, I think. There should be a recommendation there to go and dig into that. Policy. Multiple interviews described supervisors displaying a lack of awareness of official guidance regarding who is in charge under anomalous conditions. Yeah, I mean, that's questionable, because earlier on it says that in one context it should be Boeing and the CCP, but in the real situation, NASA took over, NASA took control. So again, is official guidance actually appropriate? Is that something we should include in the control structure model? I think it probably is, so I'm going to make a note of that. So we've got official... why does it keep doing that? There we go, official guidance. Official guidance regarding responsibilities in and under abnormal conditions, abnormal emergency conditions. The reason I'm writing abnormal emergency conditions is because this fits in with my how I train stamp and how I explain the concept of the various types of control structures, and how you do the analysis, what type of contexts to think about. Because when you're thinking about your operational system, once it's been designed and built and it is in operation, it will have normal operating conditions, normal operating contexts, but then there'll be situations that are a bit different, a bit abnormal, not quite what we'd expect. And then there'll be full-on emergency conditions. And so depending on which of those three system states we're in, operational states, the control structure and the components, the controllers within it, will behave in a certain way. And of course, if they're operating under abnormal or emergency conditions, the error rate, the number of mistakes and things people will make will increase, stress will increase. And so it's important to recognize what state is the various parts of the control structure it is in, and how does that influence their behavior and the potential to provide unsafe or contributory control actions. So it's important to think about that. Sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's really obvious. This lack of awareness and subsequent non-conformance to the policy. So there is a policy. So is it guidance or is it a policy? Seriously, is it guidance or is it a policy? Because from my perspective, guidance is less sort of stringent than policy is. But even then, policy is not law. So if it is supposed to be really robust and people must follow it, then how you make sure that policy and the content of it is applied is a feature of the control structure. Maybe it's a feature of this here to do with the training provider. Because essentially what we're talking about here is whenever you have a document, a procedure, a policy, a guidance, whatever it is, somehow that information has to get into the brain of the various controllers. And of course, it's got to stick in there as well. So they've got to remember it and actually be able to follow it. So what is the control structure for making that happen? And then making sure that the people that need to follow that guidance, policy, etc., actually are and can follow it. They are capable and empowered to follow it. And if there's any issues, making sure that is updated and, the knock-on effects of that update is flowed down through the control structure. So yeah, that's, again, yeah. Okay, interpersonal relations then. Supervisory management of relationships were only prevalent after strained and contentious relationships were seen between some team leads and team members. Supervisors exerted influence over strong personalities to re-establish expectations and resolution of technical conflicts between NASA and Boeing. So supervisors did that. So this sounds like there's three levels then. There's team members at the bottom, team leaders above them, and then supervisors a bit higher up. And it sort of mixes the language. So we can talk about management, leadership, supervisors. Which is it? It might sound really pedantic, but the reason I'm emphasizing it is when you're building your control structure models, you need to be clear on who exactly are these controllers. And if we're not able to establish that, it shows that there is an issue there. It needs to be made clear. It's like panning for gold. You've got your sieve in the water with some sand and debris in it, and you're trying to sieve it out and uncover the golden nuggets. That's what we need to do here. That's the process. Because otherwise it's just mud. It's just sand. Okay, so supervisory planning. So this one was about oversight. This one is about planning. So is that the activity of planning or the output of that activity? So supervisory planning evaluates how supervisory personnel assess the hazards of an operation and consider associated risk, proficiency, experience, capability, and/or crew makeup for the task or mission. Poor planning at the supervisory level compromises mission safety and effectiveness. Absolutely. So what does the control structure look like for this? Who or what is involved? What process are they following? What decisions are they making? What information do they need, to support the beliefs that they need to make good decisions? Effective planning takes into consideration team and individual dynamics, experience training, readiness, selection, and supervisory behaviours such as observing or thwarting compliance, including overall risk assessment and hazard authorization. I would love to know what that means. Hazard authorization. What does that mean? If you know in the chat, please comment below and let me know, because I'd love to know what that actually means. External motivation or supervisory influence. So NASA technical representatives describe decision making as limited by Boeing supervisory influence, which dismissed engineering questions at meetings such as the Starliner mission management team meeting, I think that is. An interview noted that Boeing appeared to have a strategy to minimize the number of individuals who are allowed to weigh in on issues during meetings, including supervisory influence on individual performance during the mission. Go fever was used to describe go fever. Is that like night fever? No, I don't think it is. Anyway, go fever was used to describe both NASA CCP and Boeing teams, which likely played a role in how supervisors influence decision making. Okay, so they want to go. It's push on from Air Force, Royal Air Force stuff back in the day when we used to do when I received human factors training when I was part of the Air Cadets and the gliding school I used to fly with. We talked about the concept of push on itis. So if you keep pushing on, perhaps you're fatigued or something's not quite right and you push on to get to the end. Maybe you rush a little bit, maybe you cut corners. That is always a symptom involved in most accidents. You become a cropper if you're not careful. So that so that it's mentioned here is quite interesting. And I like it's called Go Fever. Yeah. There we go. So risk assessment. NASA and Boeing perceive, assess and tolerate risk differently. Right, this is really, really important. So let's think about this for a minute. So let's just ignore this supervision leadership criteria. So in fact, actually, let me move that out of the way so we're not getting confused. Let's put that over there. There we go. Right, ungroup, delete. Right. So think about it. Think about this. So if NASA is this controller, and they are perceiving, assessing, and tolerating risk differently, how does that fit into this? So perceiving is about the feedback they receive and the beliefs, their mental models. Assessing is about the combination of decision making and the information they have or think they have. And then tolerating risk, again, that is a decision making control algorithm. So what criteria are they using? Where does that come from? And more importantly, why are they doing it differently? Should there, arguably they should be perceiving and assessing and tolerating risk in the same way, I would argue. And if they're not, then that needs to be obvious, that needs to be considered. So how was that dealt with? I mean, that is a huge sort of question for me. I would like to know what that is. And if I was making recommendations for future investigation, I'd go and look at that and fix that. Because that's a bit of an issue there. This includes different types of risks. So risk to mission versus risk to life. Okay. Unauthorized, unnecessary hazard. That's a bit of a strange combination of words. I don't understand the context of that. Supervisory go positions to launch without adequate data suggested fundamental. Okay, right. So launch without adequate data I would say that is almost a system level hazard that we would use in STAMP. So if you imagine using this control loop, if you imagine this is all of the decision makers all lumped into one controller, and this is the go no go process for launch, and the control action is go or no go. All of this is about launching without adequate data, without adequate qualification. So why would it make sense for that combination of controllers, supervisors, whatever organization structure it is, why would it make sense to provide that go position, supervisory go position? And it is literally listed here. It's suggested fundamental supervisory inadequacies. No, there's no suggestion about it. That is literally, if you wanted to go for, let's go for, what is the root cause, everybody? That is it, launching without adequate data, without adequate qualification. And as I've said before, and, the US Navy SEAL officer Jocko Willink says in a lot of his training and videos and books, all problems are leadership problems. And so if you're launching without adequate data or adequate qualification, it is by definition a leadership problem. So the point is of the investigation is to go and understand, well, why? Why did leadership, contribute to that situation? What is it about the controllers? What is it about the structure and their interactions? So yeah, it's... right, I understand now what this means, authorised unnecessary hazard. I think in my mind it's more authorizing unnecessary risks, unnecessary actions. It should be refined. But anyway, supervisory accountability. Supervisory accountability focuses on how supervisors respond to known deficiencies among personnel, equipment, processes, or procedures which influence conditions related to an event. Right, okay. So this is, this almost sounds like they're looking at the control loop for the supervisors. So, but it's about accountability. Okay. So they respond to known deficiencies. So we're talking about the decision to respond based on mental models that there are known deficiencies. And that is about personnel, equipment, processes, or procedures. So what feedback did the supervisors have? Were they aware that there were some deficiencies? Because if they didn't, and they were told, yeah, everything's good to go, boom, let's crack on, we shouldn't be surprised that this has happened. But I think this is a bit more complicated than that. And I'd absolutely recommend that CAST is used to dig into this and really understand what was going on, because that needs fixing. That seriously needs sorting out, because you're going to have more accidents if this one thing out of all the things we've already talked about, if that's not nailed down, it almost doesn't matter what else you do. So we really need to dig into that. And again, I would argue that it's possible that these issues exist not just in this area of the organisations, but on other programs as well. I would certainly go looking for that, looking at other programs. Right, okay, personnel management. I don't understand this green light stuff. What is that about? It should be explained in the report somewhere in an appendix. I don't know. At the onset of issues with communication and team dynamics, Boeing and NASA attempted to provide resolution at the management level to move individuals from leadership roles to support personnel. So they attempted to provide resolution. So they tried, but it didn't work. Why didn't it work? The other thing that's interesting is this management level to support personnel. Does that mean supervisor level, management level, leadership level is the same level? It's just a different word to mean the same thing, or what does it mean? And when you say support personnel, does that mean off to the side as SMEs, subject matter experts, or consultants? So it sounds like Boeing and NASA, somebody somewhere, did try to do something about that. Fantastic, but it was not effective, or apparently not effective. So why was that? Why was it not effective, and why did they not take repeated actions to try and sort that out? I think that, again, I think that is a really critical question that should be explored. It should be examined. Operations management. Supervisors struggled with complexities and uncertainties of the mission, especially after unexpected anomalies surfaced. Okay, so why was that? Why was that not controlled and managed? You know, I mean, I've worked on some really mind-blowingly complex programs. I mean, oh, yeah, anyway. But the way that complexity is managed is a critical part of how the program leadership do stuff. And if there are uncertainties, what controls are in place to identify and reduce those uncertainties? Because I can understand there's a lot of uncertainties with a test program. Totally get that. But the design of the test program should be to manage and reduce those uncertainties to a controllable level so that the program can keep moving forward without getting, without struggling too much. So what is it? Who or what is the controller for this? For the complexities and the uncertainties of the mission. So let's just make a note of that. There we go, with my fantastic handwriting. I can't even remember how to spell controller. It's there, Simon. It's got 2 L's in it. So who is the controller for that? Is there anybody? Maybe I'm assuming too much. But generally, large programs, one of their challenges is complexity and uncertainty. So they have to take action to try and manage and reduce that. So what did this program do? Because it's all right saying they struggled, but did they struggle and were unsuccessful? It sounds like they were, but we don't know that because the investigation hasn't really written about it. There we go. So the next tier is preconditions tier. Now, before I bang on about the preconditions tier and we'll finish this section, I want you to just think about what we've spoken about in the last, 33 minutes. 33 minutes. We've been able to think about things using the concept of a control loop and a control structure model to ask some really powerful questions that apparently HFAX has not equipped the investigators to go and ask. Now, I'm not saying that's necessarily a fault of HFAX. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is this method of using a control loop and a control structure allows you to structure your discovery of the system, the organization, the control structure that you are working with, and it allows you to structure your questions. It helps you to see the big picture, but also zoom into the detail, such as why would it make sense for the supervisors to behave the way they did? Or pose the question, why would it make sense for Boeing and NASA leadership to intervene in some leadership issues, move people around, and then for those issues to continue or apparently undermine the rest of how people are working? So what is it about that? How do we understand the problem? How do we decide what questions to ask and what avenues to explore? And then how do we decide to make recommendations? So I'm hoping just this short half an hour has given you some food for thought. Let me know in the comments. Give me some abuse in the comments. Let me know what your thoughts are. So the live stream still seems to be working, which is fantastic. Right, let's continue then. So we've done. Let's mark this off then. So we've done. Let's get a big tick. Everyone loves a big tick, don't they? There we go. So we've done that one. Fantastic. And we've just done that one. Now we need to do preconditions. So let's do that. Let's zoom out and do some preconditions. And I'll take my jigsaw piece with me. Let's take a copy of it up here. There we go. Right, preconditions. So these are divided into two subgroups: environmental, outside the person, or individual, within the person. And the reason I'm emphasizing the person, because the first question that is naturally going to be asked is, well, what person are we talking about here? Are we talking about the person that pressed the button, or are we talking about the person who made the decisions? Who are we talking about? Are we talking about a direct controller in control of a process, or are we talking about any one of these four? Is it this one, this one, this one, this one, or any other combination? Because we don't know yet what the control structure looks like. We've got an idea, but let's be specific. Who is the one we're talking about? And I'm thinking they're referring to this person directly in charge of the control process, but we're not certain of that. Maybe it'll explain it in a second. Just let's just keep going. Okay. Yeah, so it's conditions of individuals impacting performance. So it could be anybody and everybody in the control structure, perhaps. Let's have a look. Let's keep going. There we go. Right. So outside the person, within the person. So you could say, arguably, let's get a pen. Let's get a coloured pen. There we go. So we could be talking about essentially chopping a line off there, and this is outside, and this is inside. Hang on. Inside, you could say, there we go. Oh, in fact, actually, let's use the other. Let's use the other model. Let's use this model. That's a bit easier to see, isn't it? Let's get a big pen. Here we go. So when we say inside the person, I think they're sort of talking about inside here. And when they're talking about outside, they're talking about everything that's not in there. It's all of this. Where's my... oh, no, don't want to do that. I want to do that. I don't want a big... Let's use a big red one. There we go. So we're talking about all of this, exciting stuff, all of this. And then we're talking about the control process, the control path, the feedback path, and then also any external disturbances. So everything but what's inside the person there. There we go. Let's have a bit of green. So that's inside the person. That's how I've interpreted it. And I hope you like my colouring capabilities. Right, so what do we want now? Let's get a different colour. Pardon me, blimey neck. I need to stop drinking fizzy water. Right. There we go. Right, so I need to join that together, don't I? Because otherwise it's not going to work properly. Group. There we go. Right. Excuse me. These conditions shape thoughts, behaviours and interaction of the crewed flight test anomaly. These conditions shape thoughts, behaviours and interactions of the crew flight test anomaly. Okay. The people involved in the response and recovery to the anomaly. Anyway. Existing prior to launch that created the conditions all involved needed to deal with. Engineering safety program operators. Right. I don't think that's right. I think there shouldn't be a full stop there. I think that's why that reads a bit strange. Right. These conditions shape thoughts, behaviours and interactions of the crew flight test anomaly existing prior to launch that created the conditions all involved needed to deal with. Engineering safety program operators. Okay, so these are teams of people, I think. I think that's what that's trying to say. Again, I keep banging on about this. When you use the stamp-based approach and thinking about things through the lens of a control structure, it forces you to be specific about who or what we're actually talking about instead of using generic sort of throwaway logical local names. Safety team program operators. There we go. Right. So let's talk about environmental preconditions then. So this is the environmental topic. And then we've got individual preconditions. So environmental conditions, these are outside the person. There's the technical environment. When automation or design creates conditions, affects the actions of an individual or team, and contributes to an event. I think it means that affects the actions of. System configuration. Subject matter experts determined thrusters were flown out of qualification as a result of misinterpreted test data. Okay, so is that an external condition? Is it that the system configuration down here, thrusters were flown outside of qualification, and that was as a result of misinterpreted test data? Okay, well, what is the control loop for that? You know, who or what interpreted or was supposed to interpret test data? Why was it misinterpreted? What's going on there? So the investigation needs to dig down that path as well. Because, of course, if they've misinterpreted it this time, has it been misinterpreted previously? And that's why we're in the state that we're in. That's quite strange. Yeah. Okay. So information environment. When interactions among individuals, crews, and teams create conditions that influence the preparation and/or performance of the mission. Crew team leadership. Interviewees often described good communication within small subteams, yet difficulty with communication between teams. This led to frustration and delays for required data needed for troubleshooting. Okay, so if we think about this through the lens of CAST, let's just quickly jump up here and find out. There we go. Let's steal this one here. Let's steal this one and put it down here. Come on, computer, stop slowing things down for me. Right, let's get rid of all of that. There we go. Right. In fact, you need to be able to see it good on your screen, don't you? I don't know how I'm going to do that. Let's put it alongside and then zoom in, I think. So crew team leadership often describe good communication within small teams. So there we go. From a CAST perspective, structure analysis, communication and coordination. Yet difficulty with communication between teams. This led to frustration and delays for required data needed for troubleshooting. Okay, so what is it about the structure and its architecture and those interactions that contributed to issues with communication and contribution? You know, what is it about that? What's going on? Is there some cultural issues, you know, leadership issues? What's going on there? We need to look at that. Risk assessment during missions. Interviewees discussed absent degraded risk assessment in various team determinations. Yeah, I mean, that is not good at all. That's really bad. So why is that? Why, who or what is doing those assessments and why were they degraded? And what was done about it? How was it reported? How did the organisation respond to that? Communication. Numerous communication breakdowns were shared during interviews. Multiple methods and audiences were used during the CFT mission anomaly phase, ranging from small discussion with limited attendance to large-scale meetings with open attendance in the hundreds. Oh wow, okay, that's crazy. This aspect of communication styles was also coupled with tendencies to disallow speakers to fully communicate technical concerns, which led to frustration and sometimes uncharacteristic behaviours in key stakeholders. See that? Again, this is communication and coordination, human behavior, what's going on in there. Green light, crew communicated, list of areas to be addressed. Fantastic. And when we say crew, is this the actual flight crew that did this? Which facilitated anomaly resolution and team organization into targeting appropriate assignments, items for assessment. Yeah. Now, it's interesting because if the people at the sharp end that are taking mortal risk, if they are, they're communicating lists of areas to be addressed, their concerns, that's fantastic. But also there has to be a consideration that they may be focusing on issues which are important to them. They believe they're the important issues, but there might be other issues that maybe they don't appreciate or don't recognize the importance of. And so they will naturally have a very loud voice, but perhaps that loud voice could lead to other issues not being given the attention and resources they need. And so that has to be very carefully balanced, because of course you don't want to squash people. You need to make sure that they're empowered to speak, but that those issues are addressed accordingly. That's not an easy answer. That's not an easy answer. One person was the single point entry from NASA to Boeing. That is really interesting. That's really interesting. When others came into the mix, Boeing perceived them as new, and this contributed to less trust. That's very interesting as well. Okay, so I think what we're going to do is just have a little break. We'll have a break, and then we'll continue with this last part. And then I think we'll crack on to the next section as well. So let's take a few minutes break, and we'll come back to it. Sorry about that. Anyway, let's crack back on, shall we? Let's just make sure the noise is coming out. It looks like it is. Right, let's keep going. So we're going to talk about individual preconditions now. So this is about the inside the person or persons. So this category includes emotion, personalities or attitudes of an individual or team. Oh, there it is, look. So this does align very clearly with the concept of a control structure, but the question is, well, which layer in the hierarchy in relation to the control process are we actually referring to? And so I think it is the direct controller. So if we use this nice big model over here, it is this green one. And of course I'm talking, you can't see this because I'm not sharing my screen, am I? Right, there we go. How's that? There we go, that's better. Yeah, so what I was saying is, let's just do that again. Sorry. So now we're on individual preconditions. So psychological, the category includes emotion, personalities of or attitudes of an individual or team that create conditions affecting performance. So excuse me. So it mentions individual or team. So it's this controller, and I think it's really about the direct control of whatever the control process is. So if I just zoom back over to our picture from earlier on. So yeah, I think it confirms we're talking about what's going on in here. So if we were doing an STPA analysis, this in STPA step 4, if you look at the MIT handbook, or if you do my training, it's STPA analysis part 2. Essentially, you're looking at the behavior of the controller. But of course, when we're doing the rest of STPA Part 2, the causal scenario analysis, we'll be looking around the rest of the control loop, the other 3 elements, to understand what has contributed to these unsafe control actions. So, you know, to me, it's really clear that HVACs is helpful, but it is nowhere near as detailed as STPA or CAST. I mean, it leaves quite a lot to be desired, to be quite frank. But I'm not suggesting we should throw it away. I think if you've got people who are expert practitioners in HVACs, you should get hold of them and get them involved in the STPA or CAST accident analysis, because I think they will be very helpful and contribute a lot. Okay, so numerous aspects of this category were discussed during interviews, which of course they would be. That's what you would expect. There are 3 other individual categories not included, which are medical, perceptual, and fitness, since interviewees did not describe these factors during their interviews. You see, that's interesting, because I would have expected perceptual or stress or the ability to resist stress or manage stress would be important. But anyway, that's you know, I'm not the person who did the investigation. So anyway, or the interviews. Right, team dynamics. While internal team dynamics were often described as productive, cross-team dynamics were described as challenging and problematic. Why are we talking about that in terms of individual preconditions? Are we talking in this context the team, or what are we talking about? Again, if we had a control structure model, I'm not suggesting we need to model every single individual in a team. I mean, we could do that. That would certainly help with the interviews and getting some clarity around what the common issues are, but it's just a bit confusing to me. Multiple TA teams. So is that technical assurance? Is it TA? UA? No, it's not that one. TA, technical authority teams. Experience frustration communicating with program and program partner teams. Is that not an environmental condition? I'm not an HVACs expert. It just seems a bit odd that they'd talk about that in this section. But again, I'm reviewing this through the lens of STAMP, CAST, and STPA, and you would separate that part out. You wouldn't sort of lump it together because it muddles it. By lumping a lot of things together, you can hide things or cover things up and not realize it. Right. There we go. So multiple technical authority teams experience frustration communicating with program and partner teams. Teams within the larger team looked at the problem from a different perspective. I mean, this is always going to happen in a big program, a big project. So it's about how do these teams communicate issues with each other and track those issues to resolution. And of course, deal with actions associated with that. Emotional state. Interviewees described situations where individuals reacted to risk, high stress situations during mission management team meetings with emotional outbursts. Yeah, I've seen that many times over the years. Frustration affected team dynamics, communication, fatigue, and morale. Yeah, trust. Trust as well, and when the stress ramps up, this kind of stuff, gets worse. It's exacerbated. Now, again, emotional outbursts are a function of the individual's, background, experience, upbringing, their ability to manage and tolerate stress, and whether they've had any formal sort of training in how to do that kind of stuff. And of course, they could also have PTSD, which will exacerbate those things. So this is a very sensitive topic that has to be managed respectfully, but also leadership, there should be some form of feedback to leadership for them to be able to get involved and, remedy the situation. And if people are struggling, which they certainly will in a complex program like this, they should be offered support to be able to deal with that. I don't know if I mentioned this before. I have a few different coaches, business coaches, personal coaches, health and fitness coaches, and I work with Simon Jeffries at the Natural Edge. So Simon is an ex-UK Special Forces operator, and his company, the Natural Edge, and his team, they essentially ran what's called a stress management program. This was back in 2023. And I decided to get involved in that program because of, the organization, the projects I was working with were very, very challenging. And I got a lot out of that. It was fantastic. And the things that I learnt, the techniques that I was shown and then practiced and drilled, they enabled me to deal with far, far more complex programs and stressors. It was, there were things I was doing after that I would never have been able to do had I not gone through that training. So I, highly recommend and value that kind of support, training, and coaching. And I would highly recommend Simon Jeffries' team at the Natural Edge. In fact, I could stick a link below for you to go and have a look at, but absolutely fantastic. And I think everybody involved in difficult programs such as this one, but especially the safety team and the safety managers, the leadership, they need to be able to deal with a lot of stress, and stress does kill. That is a significant occupational hazard that needs to be managed. But most organisations today just leave it up to individuals. And if individuals don't understand that is a particular challenge and how to deal with it, and that there is help out there, then, this is an opportunity to go and look at that. So I'll stick that link in there, actually. Let's just have a look. The Natural Edge. Let's see if I get the right address. There we go. Where's the chat? The Natural Edge. Yeah, get on the website. Send Simon Jeffries a message. Tell him I sent you. But yeah, I found it absolutely life-changing. It's fantastic, and I think everyone, especially in this kind of work, should get involved in that kind of thing. Anyway, let's keep moving. What we're talking about there, yeah. So, yeah, personality style. Interviews noted that strong personalities played a role in degrading the decision-making performance of the team. Okay, so Whose team? Which team? What part of the control structure? How was that recognised? What was done about that? What wasn't done about that should have been? How did this break down? Let's look at it. Okay, so mentally exhausted and fatigued. See, that could be a symptom of stress, brain fog and all of that good stuff, difficulty to concentrate. Individuals described long hours worked by teams from both NASA and Boeing. This occurred prior to launch and during the mission, increasing individual stress levels and diminishing mental capability during anomaly troubleshooting and decision-making processes. So, this is a significant danger to the program, to the project, to the people flying. And it should be managed and controlled. Who or what is the controller dealing with that particular risk? Is there somebody? Is there a team? And if there's not, how is that actually dealt with? Is it just left up to individuals to figure out the problems themselves? Talk to Simon Jeffries and his team at the Natural Edge. They can solve those problems. Complacency. Most NASA interviewees felt Boeing overestimated positive outcomes with insufficient data to support conclusions, were reluctant to get additional testing data, and requested hard-to-get results transparency. Multiple technical representatives noted acceptance of system anomalies as within risk limits when they were outside of quals. That just blows my brains out. If the Boeing members doing that, did they know that that's what they were doing? Did they understand the implications of what they were saying? That's the first question. But the second question is, why didn't the control structure, regardless of what they were saying, if they were talking about acceptance outside of qualification limits, why didn't the system stop it? Why didn't it get abandoned or pushed to the right, or whatever needed to be done to ensure those high-level safety constraints are to be met? This is a huge part of the investigation that should be going and looking at that and fixing that. Because again, these kind of behaviours will exist in other teams, in other programs. This might appear to be unique to this particular program, but in my experience, this kind of nonsense happens all over the place. And the higher the stakes, the bigger the pressure, the bigger the numbers involved, the more likely this kind of behaviour is going to happen. Expectancy. Many individuals expressed a mental framework of expecting smooth operations without serious anomalies to occur again, and to subsequently be working through them. This impacted the preparedness for understanding what decisions would need to be made. Technical authorities were frustrated with Boeing's expectations for the mission to go nominally. Yeah. Why would it make sense for them to behave that way? Maybe it's in their interests to play the issues down. If the culture is, and I'm not saying it is, but for argument's sake, if the culture is toxic enough that people are basically saying, yeah, let's go for it when they're outside qualifications, there is a level of self-delusion that needs to happen. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I can't think of the more technical, appropriate way to say it. But when people have gone, this is a human behaviour. When you've gone down a path where there feels or appears to be no point of return, people, what are they? There's a cognitive bias. I think it's called, one of them is the sunk cost fallacy. Another one is the survivorship bias. Another one is the availability bias. Cognitive bias is going on here, where they don't really believe what's going on. They have a particular mental model, and they are focusing on that. And any other evidence to the contrary is disregarded and ignored. And it is incredibly difficult to snap people out of that kind of mindset. But that's what the control structure should be specifically designed to do. If people are behaving in these ways, the control structure should be designed to be able to, detect that and stop it, address it. So why didn't it in this case? And it's all right to say all problems are leadership problems. Leadership should have dealt with it. What I mean is the control structure should be designed to detect and deal with this kind of stuff. So what should the control structure look like? The contracts that were written, the contracts, I believe, should have clear clear information and actions for dealing with this kind of situation, this kind of stalemate. Okay, motivation. So green light, again, I wish it made sense what this green light stuff is. Both Boeing and NASA team members appeared to have the drive to figure this out. Fantastic. And that giving up was not going to be an option. Well, you've got people in space. You've got people out there that are risking their lives. You can't just give up. You've got to do what you need to do to get them back. But obviously, the fact they're in space, it's a bit late by that point. This should have been stopped before they went flying. This mitigated some of the distrust at certain points in the resolution phase of the effort regarding how to bring the crew home. I am struggling to imagine what kind of stress and nonsense must have been going on in that program for this, during this period of time. It must be life-changing. Absolutely. Acts. Use of the acts level is when there is a mishap. In the absence of a specific event, the acts level analysis is not appropriate for this investigation. Which is looking at larger organizational process with multiple stakeholders over a period of time. Okay, so what I should have done is copied and pasted that black line there to emphasize that the acts bit is not covered. So let me just move this out of the way so you can see better. Right, so this bit at the bottom here. So this is not covered by the investigation, so because they've decided that use of the acts level is when there's a mishap. Is this not a mishap? Yes, nobody's died, but it's still super, super serious. This is like a golden opportunity to understand why your control structure is inadequate in enforcing high-level safety constraints. If this is not a wake-up call that something is seriously, seriously wrong with the control structure, both technically, organizationally, across design, development, qualification, test, launch, operations, in-space operations, and response and recovery, and investigation. Because I would argue now, being nearly to the end of this investigation report and getting a feel for what's in the report, I don't think this investigation has gone far enough. But I recognise the challenges and constraints on the investigation team, their resources and time and energy and everything else. They were doing this alongside a permanent, full-time job. And of course, they're using fault trees and HVACs. So we can't really be surprised that they're not seeing the bigger control structure issues and also those involved in those different phases of the life cycle of the control structure. And so, I keep banging on, the biggest recommendation is use Stamp STPA and CAS to help with this, because you will be able to go so much further, get so much more learning, and make so much more effective recommendations for the future. And even the recommendations they've already gotten here, I've already said, they're not adequate. Yes, they will help, but they're not adequate. They're not enough. They need to go further than this. Okay, so let's summarize the HVACs stuff. Right. The program investigation team decision-making sub-team conducted 66 interviews, which I find absolutely amazing. That's fantastic. With people with varying roles and responsibilities involved in Starliner operations. So not design and development or test. Or is it just operations is a generic term for everybody? So let's just write that. So design, development. It's not working. No, don't do that. Whatever that is, don't do that. Pardon me. Right. Let's do that again. Let's make it. Right. No, not there. There. Right. Design. Development. Test. Qualification. Launch. Ops. And then we've got anomaly. I can't spell Ali, is it? I think. Can't remember. Resolution. Investigation and resolution, I should say. And then we've got response and recovery. And then we've got the actual investigation, which is what this report is coming from. So there's all of these different areas, all these different control structures that interact to enable this mission to happen. And of course, most of the stuff that's talked about in this report, because that's how it's been structured, is about launch operations and a bit about anomaly investigation and resolution. So it doesn't really go into any of this other stuff. But there are clearly issues all over here to get this spacecraft to where it was. So, yeah, I think there's a bit of a lost opportunity here. And we need to recover it, because otherwise we're going to cause a lot of problems and expensive accidents in the future. And lives are going to be involved. Access to space is going to be affected. Okay, so the semi-structured interviews. I think I banged on about this the other day. So I'm going to bang on about it again just to remind you. So when interviewing people, I use the control loop. I literally have this picture in my brain, burnt into my brain. Let me just get rid of this off of here. Look, there we go. Right. So I have this burnt into my brain. This is a big jigsaw piece with lots of other bits on it. But I have this burnt into my brain. And whenever I speak to somebody, whenever I interview them, one of the first things the second thing I ask them, after asking them to tell me in their own words what happened, the first question after that I ask is to establish where they are, where they think they are in this control structure. Are they involved in the control process itself? Are they a direct controller of that process, or are they part of that? Are they a controller that coordinates or influences the direct controller? Are they involved in controlling and influencing the control process itself? Are they involved in leadership of the operations control structure? Or are they involved in leadership of the design and development of this control structure? Or are they involved in response and recovery? Whereabouts do they fit? And obviously I don't show them the control structure and say, which controller are you? Because, unless they've had my training, they're not going to know. So it's all in your head. Where are they? Where is this interviewee, the person I'm speaking to, in this model? And then once you've established that, you can start asking questions, very specific questions. And quite often they say, well, how did you know that? How did you know to ask that question? That's a very interesting question. I'm glad you asked that. I've never thought about it like that before. This really unlocks the ability to be fantastic at doing interviews. But of course, you've got to be very, very careful how you ask the questions and how often you ask questions and people to repeat themselves, because you can actually alter people's memories and recollection. Especially if you focus on certain aspects too much, too hard, they can misremember things, or they may say something in the first place, and then when questioned further, they can start to recite other things. And you've got to be very careful you're not potentially implanting ideas into their mind. But that comes with being the skill of an interviewer. And I'm not saying I'm a skilled interviewer. It's just I've found this model incredibly helpful to get to the bottom of things. Fantastic. Right, let's go back to where we were. Right. So the semi-structured interviews consisted of Likert scores or Likert scores and feedback in 5 general areas. So we have team dynamics, communication, organizational structure, organizational culture, and decision making. We have said in the previous live streams where we talk about this, I think it's live stream number 8, something like that. But we talked about this in detail at that stage, so I'm not going to go over that again here. Interviewee feedback when mapped onto the NASA HVACs model. That's a good idea, everybody. You could map the feedback onto a control structure model and see where the gaps are. Anyway, supports the PIT findings and recommendations, all 3 organizational categories of culture, procedures, and resources, 3 of the 4 supervisory categories, oversight, planning, accountability, and 3 of the 8 preconditions, technical information and psychological, were substantially discussed during all the interviews. Okay, so they used HVACs in a way to help with the interviews, or at least, make categorize the information that came out from the interviews. So that's really cool. But imagine if you're using STAMP. Imagine if you're using the concept of a control structure model to figure that out. I'm hoping at the end of this video you're like, wow, Simon, this is fantastic. We need to do this as well as HVACs, or in place of, potentially. This investigation uncovered consequential differences in Boeing assumptions and expectations. Yeah, I could have told you that within hours using STAMP. While the organizations differ knowingly differ culturally, contractual requirements within the existing shared assurance approach proved inadequate. Oh, right, hang on, sorry. While the organizations knowingly differ culturally, as you'd expect, because they're different organizations, contractual requirements within existing shared assurance approach proved inadequate. Yeah, fantastic. The organisation faced multiple systemic human factors issues. It's not just human factors issues at all. Well, no, there are other issues, but I suppose what I'm trying to say is when you start thinking about things through the lens of STAMP, you don't really differentiate between humans, organisations, technical or procedural. It's all in the same model. So you don't, you're not forced to think about those individually. You think about all of them all of the time or some of the time. As you move around the control structure, you address those elements. It's kind of part of the model. You're not just looking at one thing, you're looking at all of it together. So when it says multiple systemic human factors issues, yes, it is, but there are other systemic aspects as well to do with the control structure and the behaviours of the controllers within it. These vulnerabilities ultimately led to a degradation of trust between NASA and Boeing organizations, the technical authorities and the CCP and the Flight Operations Directorate. Did I get that right? Did I remember? Yeah, look at that. I remembered an acronym. I've done a thing. How fantastic is that? Anyway, organizations and between the CCP and the International Space Station programs, the factor This factor, as well as the other red light organizational dynamics, presented elevated risks to the human spaceflight programs and warrants attention. Yes, it does, absolutely. Totally agree with that. Fantastic. Right. Moving forward deserves thoughtful and deliberate action at the highest levels of NASA, the mission directorates, and the programs. Yes, I agree. Totally agree. So let's do some STAMP. Let's get that sorted out and we can get this sorted out. Pardon me. Okay, so that is the end of Appendix A. human factors. So let's get our little block, and not that one, this one. Is it this one? Nope, not that one. This one, that's the one I wanted. Let's do that then. So we've done Appendix A. Let's have a look at some. Well, let's check the clock. 7:20 local time. Okay. So we had a quick look at this Likert scale last time. It doesn't really look that exciting, to be honest with you. Let's read the introduction. Let's see if the introduction makes it sound more exciting. The following data provides a quantitative analysis, numbers, fantastic, of employee perceptions regarding the effectiveness of the joint team's performance during the Starliner mission, specifically during the mission time frame, beginning with the flight readiness review and the return of the Starliner vehicle. Methodology. To systematically gather this feedback, a structured survey methodology was employed, utilising a series of scale questions. This introduction will provide an overview of the Likert scale as a research instrument, including its inherent limitations, its application in this specific context, and a summary of the key statistical findings, including the mean and mode from the interviews conducted. They effectively quantify opinions. They are simple for people to understand and answer. They provide more nuanced data than a simple yes or no. Okay. Yeah, I mean, maybe I don't understand the importance of this. Maybe I'm being a little bit sort of facetious, but I personally find this. Yeah, obviously a lot of work has gone into this, but I can't really see what extra benefit this provides, apart from you get a feel for where these different factors, the interviewees view these different factors. And of course, the more red it is, the worse it is, and the more blue it is, the better it is. Fantastic. But, when we're doing the cast analysis, when you speak to people and build the model and do the analysis, you will find this stuff. But I suppose it helps if you to combine all this data together and give some kind of qualified perspective. I suppose that is helpful. Yeah. Okay, I'm not going to go into the detail of that. I don't really find it very exciting. It's kind of... Yeah, anyway, I might read it later on. Okay, Appendix C, everybody, references. Fantastic. This is the most exciting part of any investigation report or complex technical document, because as a reader, as a user of that information, when you look at the reference document, it can help you get a feel for how this report has been created and the pedigree of the documents they've used to do the investigation. So if they're referencing old documents or out-of-date documents, it raises a question in your mind, well, hang on, why are they using old documents, out-of-date documents? Why are they not using the latest ones? So really, in a complex technical report with a detailed list of references, some of the references and the use of those references should be annotated and explained somewhere, maybe not in the reference table, but elsewhere. So I always check the reference list. It's quite insightful, the reference list. Anyway, significant Starliner program control boards and documentation for the propulsion system. Okay, so that's all the documentation. Crew flight test timeline links from the agency flight readiness review to launch. So that's a list of meetings. CCP program control board meetings from launch to undock. CCP program control board meetings from launch to undock related only to propulsion. Starliner mission management team meetings from launch to undock. Starliner crew commercial program engineering review boards from go, no go to return. Right, okay. I mean, that for me, that would be really interesting because that's before, in the run up to the go, no go decision. And in that section is ultimately, well, why did it make sense to go and try and put these people in orbit? Why did it make sense to do that, given that the things were not qualified? Why would that make sense? Okay, so we've done that. We've done Appendix C. Appendix B I might come back to later on when I'm feeling a bit more up to it. Appendix E. Okay, so this is one page. Yeah, let's see if we can get through this. So this is the organizational trust plan, and it's a sample. I don't know what it means, organizational trust plan. What does that mean? Okay, so the goal, to rebuild and repair trust and confidence between NASA and Boeing teams. Okay, that's what it is. By establishing clear expectations, open accountability, and shared commitment to safety and mission success, starting with leadership and expanding to all team members. Objectives: restore confidence in leadership and team alignment through transparent communication and accountability. Address historical issues by acknowledging past challenges and misaligned expectations. Reinforce shared values of safety, integrity, and mission success. Strengthen team partnerships through structured engagement and facilitated collaboration. Action steps. So 5 steps. Leadership engagement. Start immediately. CCP leads the development and execution of the plan. Initiate program managers. So these are all the different candidates for inclusion in our control structure model. Boeing counterparts. CCP. Conducted facilitated sessions to openly discuss team challenges, express accountability outwardly to show accountability for missteps and seek feedback and input on how to repair trust, and rebuild confidence across teams. Team-wide rollout. Expand sessions to include other key NASA and Boeing team members. Use structured team building activities to address grievances and build rapport. Ensure leadership continues to stay engaged and actively participate in the process to display commitment to continue learning and development. When it says ensure leadership continues to do this, who is doing the ensuring? Who is the controller that does that specifically? Is it the CCP leads, program managers, TA organizational leaders? Who is it? Training and development. Implement Covey's Speed of Trust course for intact teams. Is this Stephen R. Covey? Speed of Trust. Yeah, it is Stephen R. Covey. Very interesting. Yeah, if you've not read Stephen R. Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People and the 8th Habit, I recommend reading it or listening to it on audiobooks. I think it's good. I've not come across the Speed of Trust book yet, so I think I'm going to stick that on my list and consume that voraciously. Written in 2006. Yeah, I'll have a look at that. Fantastic recommendation. Thank you. Thank you to the team who recommended that. Let's make that big and green. Provide coaching and tools to reinforce trust-building behaviours. Yeah, provide coaching. This goes back to what I was saying on one of my early live streams and also today. Get in touch with Jocko Willink and Leif Babin at their team at Echelon Front. Get them in to do some leadership training about extreme ownership and all of this stuff. Fantastic. It'll help with this. And get in touch with Simon Jeffries and his team at the Natural Edge to help with personal development, stress management, and performance. Fantastic, both of those. Communication and documentation. Develop and share a written plan outlining expectations, commitments, and partnership principles. Reinforce shared values through regular updates and visible leadership support. Timing and milestones. Launch plan well before the next major mission milestone. Monitor progress and adjust based on feedback and team dynamics. Expected outcomes. Improve trust and collaboration across NASA Boeing teams. Increase confidence in leadership and team alignment. Stronger focus on mission execution and safety. Yes, that is definitely an expected outcome, but there are loads and loads of issues all over the control structure that need to be addressed. Because without those being addressed, you could have as much leadership training and trust building as you could possibly have. But if the structure doesn't support that, then it's just a waste of time. It's a matter of time before something else bad happens. So yeah, so that's Appendix E. Let's knock that one off then. So let's duplicate that. Let's stretch it down here. Let's do that bit. Huh. That's weird. Did I miss something? No, hang on. Where's Appendix D? Where's Appendix D, everybody? That's weird. That's why I've got a gap there, isn't it? Because I recognised this previously and then forgot. Appendix D is missing, apparently. Right, so maybe I've been giving the investigation report authors a bit of hassle about missing acronyms. Maybe it's just because they're missing the section in the PDF. And this acronym set... Oh, that is Appendix D. Wait a minute. Oh, I know what I've done. I know what I've done. It's not missing at all. You know where it is, don't you? I put it up at the top, didn't I? Of course I did. There it is, Appendix D. I stuck it at the top. Right, that's why it's... So it's not missing, it is there. Simon. Right, so let's just zoom in again. So we've done Appendix D. We've done Appendix E now. So we've got Appendix F and then the SDRT report, STAR report, and then the Boeing root cause analysis summary. So they are huge, 104 pages. So that's going to be the next couple of live streams, I think, probably a few, 4 or 5 maybe. But the investigation team chartering memo, that is 3, 4, 5, 6 pages. So yeah, I think maybe we'll do that on the next live stream. The investigation team chartering memo. And just notice it does have a... Let's just mark the date there. February... Valentine's Day 2025. So yeah, right. I think that's enough for today. We'll continue next week. I'll schedule some more live streams. In the meantime, if you do need some help and support, please visit my website, Whiteley-Safety.co.uk. Press the button, I need help now, send me a message, we'll set up a call, see how I can possibly help. As I mentioned before, we can have a conversation. You'll talk about your problem. It'll take me 5 minutes to solve, and so you don't have to bang your head against a wall for 6 months. And if it's something I can't solve in 5 minutes, then we can see how we can work together to get that addressed. But please don't hesitate. And likewise, click on the link to register. You're on a waiting list for the free workshop, because once we've finished this, and we're getting very close now. In fact, I could probably run a preliminary workshop on what we've already done before I get into the other investigation reports. In fact, maybe that's an idea. I could do 3 workshops or 2 workshops, one on the main body of the pit investigation and then one on the other investigation reports. So zooming out. So this is the Starliner test and anomalies review investigation team report. So this is quite a large report, quite a lot to it that we'll need to dig through. So maybe I could do that as a separate workshop. But anyway, join the waiting list and I'll send you an email when it's all ready. And of course, if you want some foundation training, I do have a 1-day foundation training course. So you can learn stamp, STPA and cast from a foundation perspective, all compressed into 1 day. It is an intensive day, but it'll essentially equip you to be a contributor to any kind of STPA or cast analysis project. And that is 997 plus VAT for UK. And of course, I'm going to be releasing some new dates for that for the next quarter. So click that and join the waiting list. Fantastic. Right. Well, thank you very much for your attention tonight. Have a good weekend, and I will see you on the next live stream next week. Take care. Have a good night.